economic indicator is bad news for the world. Now, I like to look at indicators because there's leading indicators, there's lagging indicators. I like to look at leading indicators to try to figure out where things are going. Now, not one single indicator is conclusive. However, they can be very powerful, and that's exactly what we're looking at today. We've got news that Europe is changing dramatically. As a matter of fact, there's a massive shift that has massive implications for people in Europe, for people of the world, and even people in the United States. So let's go ahead and jump right in and see exactly what we're talking about. So as you can see on my screen right here, it says that Germany's much vaunted trade surplus disappears as import prices surge. So what does that mean? Germany's trade surplus. So that means that they are, selling more than they're buying. You already know, if you manage any kind of a budget like you live, which you do, that you're supposed to earn more than you spend, right? You should produce more than you consume, and that's exactly what's happening with Germany. They have been exporting more than they've been importing, but that has changed. Now, you may think that that's not a big deal, but let's take a look and see what's happening here. So it says new data released Monday shows that Germany posted a foreign trade deficit of €1 billion. And this marks a significant moment for the German economy, which has reported trade surpluses for several decades. So for decades and decades, they've been sending out more goods than they've been importing in. They have a positive account as opposed to a deficit. It says Bloomberg reported that in 1991 was the last time the country reported a monthly trade deficit. So what? What does that matter? What do we care if Germany is spending more money than they're making? Well, it matters a lot. Let's continue to look at this. Germany posted a foreign trade deficit of $1 billion. We already said that. Its high level of exports has been an important economic driver. And this is where we start getting into the nitty-gritty here. An economic driver for what? Now, in Europe, there's multiple countries there, but of course they've formed the European Union, and they have their own currency, which is, of course, the euro. Now, that means that all the countries are in this together, all using one currency, and some of the countries are stronger and some of the countries are weaker. And as you might suspect or imagine, some of those weaker countries that don't really produce anything are being dragged along by the countries that do. And so if you're one of the strong countries that are literally carrying the rest of the continent on your back and you start falling, that's bad news. We're going to show you what other countries are being affected by this and just how bad. But we can see here, as I said, Germany's vaunted trade surplus is now gone. And it says here, Germany, just like many other European nations, has been paying more for energy and food, particularly in the wake of the Russia invasion of Ukraine. So now Germany is forced to pay these astronomical prices for both food and energy. Why? Well, because they've made themselves 100% dependent on Russian energy, and a lot of dependence on the food that comes from Russia, Ukraine as well. And of course, those have gone up. Now, why is this a big deal? You can see here in this Wall Street Journal article that Germany's economy was once Europe's engine, but it's now holding back. So we can see here, Germany's export-oriented economy used to be a reliable engine for pulling Europe out of slumps. And so, again, there's lots of countries, Greece, Italy, Spain, those countries that can't even carry their own weight. They can't pay their debts, and they need bailout after bailout after bailout to stay solvent. Well, they're not solvent, they're insolvent, but to stay in power, let's say. And so where do they get these bailouts? Where do they get that money from? It comes from Germany. They're the economic engine that pulls the rest of the continent along. And if they're falling, everything else does. Let's take a look at this right here. So what we can see here is that the pigs are disintegrating. What are the pigs? Well, that's Portugal, Italy, and I'm drawing a blank here. Spain, sorry, Greece, sorry about that. Drawing a blank. So those are the pigs, all the countries around there, and they're disintegrating. We can see here that Spain, its CPI, its inflation number, is up 10.2%, and it was only estimated to be 8.7. Now, when I say only 8.7, that's higher than we have in the United States. But the big thing is, one, obviously it's really bad to be up 8.7%. Prices are going up by that amount. But the problem is that was their estimate, and they went way over their estimate, which is never a good sign. CPI is 10%. In Greece, again, another nation that just can't seem to get it together for the last decade, can't even manage to continue to pay their bills, and they need Germany to keep them afloat. Here, Greece is up 11.3%. Now, what does that mean? Why does that matter, right? Well, it says here the ECB, the European Central Bank, is about to start hiking rates, and they have stopped expanding their balance sheet. So the United States Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, started, well, in November of last year, said they were going to start raising rates. Of course, in this year, in 2022, they did start raising rates. And as they've been raising rates, it's basically put the screws to the rest of the world. And we're seeing emerging markets blowing up left and right. Of course, we're talking about Argentina and Peru and Ecuador and Sri Lanka, Lebanon. They're all blowing up. When I say blowing up, I mean they're basically collapsing because they have no more money because the dollar is getting stronger. Now, in Europe, they need way more money. Their inflation is eating them alive. And now the economic engine, which is Germany, is now not exporting enough goods and services. So who's going to continue to pull them along? Well, the central bank, the ECB, is going to need to print trillions of dollars and buy their bonds, put it into the economy to keep it afloat. But how can they be easing when the United States is tightening? How can they be easing rates when the U.S. is increasing rates? And the answer is, of course, they can't, which is part of the entire problem that we're talking about here. So it says that the ECB is about to start hiking rates, and they have stopped expanding their balance sheet. They've stopped putting money out there. They've started to raise rates because they have to, because the U.S., the Federal Reserve, is doing the same thing. But that means, it says here, that means nobody is going to be buying the pigs' bonds. Here's the ECB balance sheet. So you can see this ECB balance sheet has been blowing up, but nobody's going to be buying the pigs' bonds. Because if the ECB is not going to do it, who's going to do it? Who in their right mind would? The answer is nobody. And it says here, this is going to cause interest rate spikes around the Eurozone as consumer prices keep rising. Prices are rising. Countries don't have enough money. They can't pay their debts, their entitlement. That pushes interest rates up because they're going to have to pay more and more money to get someone to loan them money. And that's going to make it almost impossible for them to borrow. And you can see where this is going. Now, we can see it played out in real time right here. This chart that I have on the screen is the Dixie, the dollar index. And this is the strength of the dollar compared to a basket of currencies, mostly the euro, also the yen, some other currencies as well, but mostly the euro. And you can see how that is. This is the U.S. dollar and the euro right here. And you can see it's almost straight up. I mean, from this low right here, we're up 20% on the Dixie. We were up similar 20%. So about the same. So you can see euro makes up a lot of that. But also it's because the dollar is getting stronger next to all the other currencies. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that as the dollar gets stronger, it's getting stronger compared to what? It's getting stronger compared to other currencies. But it's possible that the dollar is getting stronger against other currencies while it's also getting weaker to things that we really need, like food and energy, things like that, goods and services. So keep that in mind. The dollar is getting stronger to currencies, but it's also getting weaker to goods and services like food and energy. And so think about that in mind. But what does this mean? Well, what this means is that if the economic engine of Europe, which is Germany, is failing now, which it is, how will the rest of the nations, the pigs, how will they stay afloat if the ECB is going to have to tighten and if they're going to have to tighten their monetary policy? And the answer is they won't. So just like we've already seen these tier 3, tier 4 nations crumbling, like I said, Sri Lanka, Peru, Ecuador, Turkey, Lebanon, etc. Now it's time for the tier 3 and tier 2 nations to start defaulting. So keep an eye on these European nations. If you're holding money in euros, if you have your investments in Europe, be very aware of that. But let me know what you think. Leave me a comment down below. If you're not already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. And oh yeah, while you're at it, hit that like button so more people see these videos. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And that's what I got. To your success. I'm out.